Hello, everyone. My name is Blair Meriden, and I'd like to welcome you to our CrowdStrike Falcon Exposure Management webinar. As always, this training is brought to you by TD SYNNEX Public Sector, an authorized CrowdStrike distributor and the premier government solutions aggregator, solving IT challenges for the federal, state, and local and health markets. Before we get started, let's go over a few housekeeping items. Your lines are muted for the duration of the training session. However, if you have questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to drop any questions in the Q&A or chat field. The session will be recorded and can be accessed later via the same area where you registered for the training. So if you miss a previous session, no worries, just go to the session listing and you can watch the recorded sessions there. Also be on the lookout for a quick survey before we conclude. We'd really appreciate your feedback so we can make any adjustments for future training sessions. And if you have any technical questions, please message Felicia directly in the chat. Before we begin, here's a brief introduction for today's subject matter expert from CrowdStrike. Peter Fabianski. Peter is a solutions architect at CrowdStrike specializing in the public sector. With over 5 years of hands-on experience, Peter is a mastermind in networking engineering, system administration, and IT solutions. And if you haven't sat in on one of his webinars, you're in for a treat today. Peter's a wealth of knowledge and inspiration in endpoint security, identity security, and threat intelligence spaces. So without further ado, take it away, Peter.
Thanks, Blair. Let me go ahead and share on my screen here. We can get going. So for everyone that's hopping in here, as Blair mentioned, we are focusing on a specific area within the CrowdStrike platform today called exposure management. Now, I always like to kind of show this slide when we first dive in here so you can get a better understanding of what exposure management really looks like and what else we offer from this singular kind of portfolio here. One of the things to kind of highlight is we can do so much more. And again, if you haven't heard some of our webinars around threat intelligence or endpoint security, I believe you can get those on demand, or we haven't had a few of these quite yet. Just make sure you stay in tune and kind of follow up on the emails from the TD SYNNEX group. That being said, all of this can be done in a single agent. So that's the one point I always like to point out. Now, before we get into the actual product, I always like to start right here and kind of give people some context of like what exposure management is. This is, I'd probably say, the closest thing you'll see to like a Webster's dictionary type definition of exposure management, but it's a pretty broad term that's really covering different types of attack surfaces, whether it be external assets, internet-facing assets, cloud infrastructure, cloud workloads, Kubernetes containers, different vulnerability types, and it is the kind of proactive sense or discipline, similar to vulnerability management, really focused on being proactive and managing those risks rather than being reactive and trying to take care of them after the fact. So that is kind of our market definition of like what exposure management is and kind of what the thought process was here. Now, if we go and think about that kind of line right here where vulnerability management as proactive security complements real-time security. Again, you can kind of see our endpoint protection and our endpoint detection and response protection right here. It's sitting here real time. Vulnerability management goes hand in hand with that because while you have that real-time protection, someone may be trying to leverage the 0-day of a existing vulnerability, whether it be externally facing, an application vulnerability, an OS vulnerability, and being proactive on your vulnerability management can go ahead and shrink the attack surface that a adversary could go and try and expose or break into your network and move laterally and steal data or try and encrypt you, whatever their goals may be. So that's kind of the idea here. Again, kind of to compare vulnerability management and EDR, vulnerability management is really is a Windows kind of open here. endpoint detection response is really kind of giving you a view of, hey, like someone's currently like inside your house. They jumped through that open window. So an easy kind of solving point here is, okay, well, if the window's open and the window's not supposed to be open, close the window and someone can't jump through it. That's kind of the very basic sense of what exposure management is really focusing around. When you're talking around vulnerabilities. Now, from a market opportunity perspective, it's pretty big. You can see exposure management definitely hits on a number of different items. Like vulnerability management, EASM or internal attack surface management. If you're not familiar with that term, that's kind of like aggregating data from an outside view looking in and being able to passively update it so you have a better understanding of what's kind of going and how other people see you from an outside perspective. Of course, like IT asset management, like being able to, check on systems, seeing what's online, checking what versions they're running and being able to like do your patching and things of that nature. So definitely a huge market context, depending on, kind of how you look at it. From this perspective, again, speaking of adversaries, they're nimble and they have a very, good, kind of set of tradecraft to kind of, angle and attack, various customers. You know, if you aren't following LinkedIn or what's going on at Black Hat this week, CrowdStrike actually released our 2024 Global Threat Report. Go pop open over to our website to go grab that. It will actually give you more updated data points. I've been thumbing through it today myself, but it's always a good read, especially if you're interested on kind of how we're tracking adversary groups and other intelligence kind of big picture stuff or low picture stuff as well. Um, so again, your average breakout time for adversary actors from an e-crime perspective is down to like a hair over an hour. And what this really means is how fast can an organization or an adversary get into an organization and be able to laterally move and complete their objective. So if you have a team on the SOC side of things or an MSSP, however you're structured, and they're moving in a kind of meaningful way, but not with the same agility as these adversaries, they may be getting in and moving faster, and you may be kind of behind the curveball. One of the ways to be able to stay ahead of these adversaries is being able to be proactive on patching these vulnerabilities, identifying which ones need your attention first, and being able to make sure that any externally facing digital assets really aren't exposed to the web either. So one of the other things is our IT landscape is really always changing. If you look back, 7 years ago, even before COVID, I'd argue, you had a lot of traditional infrastructure, laptop servers, desktops. People are just kind of plugging in. They have a metal or a thick clients that they're utilizing every day. And by the way, much more people were also going into the office or physically present, whereas I feel like remote employees are definitely, a growing kind of trend as well, post COVID. But that being said, if you look at the infrastructure that we're leveraging now, you're looking at, bring your own devices, Internet of Things or OT devices, cloud infrastructure for development, DevOps, and testing, or, spinning up other things like virtual machines or virtual applications. And you kind of have that culmination all, reflected in a hybrid workload here as well, or a hybrid kind of, setting as well. The point is, with all these complex machines interacting with each other, they're exposing a lot more surfaces where adversaries can actually live between these different siloed tool sets and be able to take advantage and kind of live off the land in a more, kind of subtle way. So all of this kind of arms you with a lot of knowledge, but I imagine you're probably thinking the same type of questions here. It's like, okay, like how secure are you? How exposed are we? And like how do attackers see us? And like what's our risk here? And then from an IT perspective, like, okay, cool, like we know we need to get systems patched, but like how many systems do we have to patch? Like what patches should we prioritize? These are the things that if you go talk to like your CISOs, your security operators, your IT directors, your C-suite, they're going to have these conversations continually because they are something static that you just say, okay, we patched all the systems, now we're good to go. No, this is a continuous kind of group effort, if you will, across different silos. So And now that we've kind of identified the problem, again, there's a very clear thing, getting outlined here. We need a better approach. Again, CrowdStrike's all about helping our customers stop breaches. So how do we stop breaches from a perspective of exposure management? Let's go ahead and stop them before they start to be able to prioritize vulnerabilities and which ones matter most and which threats matter most. Okay, we can go ahead and have that active protection. So this is really where we can dive into Falcon Exposure Management. This is really a combination of a number of different modules, some new, some old that you may have heard of that Falcon has had for some bit. But what we're doing is we're really bringing together a lot of this information. And when I say information, we're talking about endpoint telemetry that the sensors are collecting, as well as external attack surface management data. Again, I believe it's like 2 years ago at this point, we acquired a company called Reposify, now known as Falcon Surface, which again, if you're just looking for an EASM kind of approach, you can buy that solution standalone, just to kind of dip your feet into the world of CrowdStrike. That being said, exposure management really gives you kind of that full unified approach. So when you're looking at it, and I mentioned we have IT SecOps, and if I scroll back to our little platform slide, that's why I kind of have this X'd out right here. IT SecOps is now exposure management. And when you're looking at this, you're going to have things like Spotlight, File Vantage, which is helping with file integrity monitoring, Surface, which is our external stack surface management solution, like I said, and Discover, which is kind of helping you identify other issues, inside and out from that IoT, OT kind of plane. With exposure management, it's bringing together Discover, Spotlight, and Surface. You can still have these as standalone products, but exposure management is really focusing on giving you this kind of, all-encompassing coverage with additional features, dashboards, and consolidated views to really help stay ahead of the adversary. Now, this is really where you can kind of focus on different vendors. If a organization is looking at different network scanners or vulnerability solutions or third-party intelligence, you can go ahead and be able to have these different items really, you can leverage these different items and have different conversations saying, hey, if they're an existing CrowdStrike customer, you can kind of be able to pivot and say, well, why don't you take a look at exposure management to be able to displace it. Same thing with kind of exposure management. If you look, we, instead of having network scanners, vulnerability agents, and third-party intelligence, we have our active scanning already built in place here. With our passive data collection from our sensors, as well as the ability to have kind of that third-party vulnerability ingestion as well to pull all this together. Again, to kind of double tap on what you're seeing from comprehensive exposure management, this is really where you have the ability to break down a different, these different modules here. So Discover is really going to be able to give you that active discovery, eternal attack surface, passive discovery, see what accounts and applications are floating out there. Assess is really focusing on giving you these various benchmarks, vulnerabilities, end-of-life software misconfigurations. Prioritization will be able to say, well, this is how a adversary might be able to kind of position an attack on your organization by XYZ items because these vulnerabilities are out there and they're not actively patched. Criticality based on access. Maybe just because something has a 9.9 on the CVS or CVE score doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be the first one leveraged because it may have higher complexity and a myriad of things. But I'd say one of the biggest things here is, okay, let's identify the problems, let's prioritize it, but let's also have the ability to go ahead and fix and or remediate these different items as well. So that's where this comes into play, where we can go ahead and integrate into your tickets, where your IT department may be leveraging the same ticketing system as you. We can go ahead and plug in with different patching integrations and have, again, guided remediation steps or, a plugin with, SOAR with our Falcon Fusion. So we'll go ahead and kind of show you a couple of these slides on like the dashboards and what they kind of look like. We can go ahead and kind of grab their, all these different assets through these different, scanning methodologies that we have. We have the ability to kind of, be able to pop into like an asset classification and filter based on rules, based on criticality. So again, if you're trying to like assign asset criticality with rules to be able to then filter down to specific endpoints, you can do that very easily. You can also see kind of a breakdown of a configuration assessment as well. So this is where you can look at different CIS benchmarks and look at compliance from a CIS window as well. This is really where you can go ahead and be able to leverage all of this data in a couple different dashboards, and they're all clickable and interactable as well. So that's what makes a lot of this data proactive and being able to kind of jump off or pivot off of it. And of course, like I mentioned, we have the ability to really leverage Falcon Fusion here to go ahead and be able to push out emergency Windows patches, be able to have some automated efforts, and have these workflows kind of be in place. We're also working on additional integrations with other third-party patching software out there. I believe like Ncase and I want to say it's Big Fix is the other one that we're working on right now to be able to have Falcon Fusion, be able to then pivot off of that. We have others in the pipe as well too. But I just again wanted to kind of show that off really quickly because we're just going to pivot over to the actual screen here. So give me one sec, and I will go ahead and show you guys what the console actually looks like in real life here. So when you're actually logging into um, when you're actually logging into Falcon and going into exposure management, you have a number of different views that you can look at. This is kind of what you're looking at from a vulnerability management, configuration assessments. You can set up your various active discovery rules down there. But where I always like to start here is really focusing on these exposure dashboards. Again, this is a lot of information that you're looking at here. And the idea with exposure management is you want to be able to bubble up a lot of this information that you're looking at into a comprehensive view that's actionable. So this is really where we want to be able to pivot and we want to be able to look at this data at a high level perspective so you can go ahead and be able to understand what's going on, where your challenges lie, and how you can go ahead and actually be able to kind of pivot between those various challenges. Looking at assets, you can go ahead and be able to leverage the discovery portion of exposure management and see kind of like your managed, unmanaged, and unsupported licenses or agents. Again, managed, unmanaged, pretty straightforward. Unsupported, this could be like networking equipment or stuff that we're picking up or IoT devices that we can't necessarily push the sensor to. Again, we'll show you this number right here of like internet exposed managed assets. So this is like a workstation or a workload or some type of server that may be exposed to the internet. Again, clicking on that will actually pivot you over to the assets within Falcon, and it'll load up a list. And remember that rules engine we were already talking about? It already filters it for you. So again, this is pretty straightforward. It's just an internet exposure, yes, and applied shows you all the different managed assets here. So you can see we have some Windows 10 and Windows 11 boxes that are exposed to the the outside world here. A couple Amazon Linux instances, maybe they're EC2 instances or something else that we're running up in the cloud. But the idea here is now you have an understanding of, okay, let me go take a look at this asset. Let me click into it. Let me see what's going on and see why it's exposed out to the outside world. Like there's no reason in a lot of cases why we should have desktops, just be, externally facing. So that tells you, it's either misconfigured or, someone configured it like that, maliciously on purpose, whether it be maybe an insider threat or some type of, adversary. Again, you may have adversaries living, kind of off the land within your organization. Again, this is where you can also click into different things like servers, be able to then double click and go see full details. And this will actually be able to pivot you into like the Falcon asset details. And this is what this view looks like for every single kind of, machine that you're breaking down here. You'll be able to see, the details, the asset IDs, cloud provider, if it's in the cloud. You'll be able to see all the information, serial numbers. So if you have some type of asset inventory tracker, you can go ahead and cross-reference it with that. But if we scroll down here, you get all of this information that we're kind of looking at from an exposure dashboard perspective at a single machine perspective as well too. So we can see, again, we're not going to get into this today, but identity threat protection is a huge solution that we offer to our customers to help against identity-based account attacks. You can see how many accounts are actually logged in and have been logged in on this machine. We can see the total amount of failed login attempts, the total amount of successful ones, browser extensions, file integrity changes, vulnerabilities, of course. You kind of get the idea here. But the idea is if we pivot over here to vulnerabilities, you can click in here and get kind of a machine by machine view here and pivot off of a full table too. So, when you're looking at this data, we give you a number of different views. And I'd say this exploit status is one of the biggest things that you want to be able to look at. Out of 205 results, like 3, 6, number 8 right here is a medium. So you might put that lower down on the list, but you can go ahead and see that it's available. Exploit code exists, but we haven't seen it be actively used quite yet. So that's a great way to be able to prioritize specific patches. Again, switching back to kind of the macro level, you have the ability to see this risk-based prioritization around vulnerabilities from your organizational level as well. Again, this asset criticality graph allows you to be able to kind of sort by vulnerabilities or vulnerability IDs, and then be able to look at a number of different lenses here, whether it be CVSS severity, if that's kind of the view that you're looking at, or you can go ahead and look at exploit stats like I was. It's like, okay, actively used critical. So we have 12,000, critical asset criticality, vulnerabilities in this particular environment. But again, if you're going down here like non-critical and high, like you have an equally, if not more, kind of level of vulnerabilities that you want to be able to patch. Again, same idea. You click on that, you'll pivot into kind of a macro view from our spotlight, perspective. This is part of exposure management, and you can go ahead and be able to dive into this by computer. And if you're like, well, I don't know what the CVE is, you can click right into it. Go over to NIST's website to get more data on it, but you can also just look right here and get a bunch of information around it too. Again, we'll help you and tell you like, hey, this is a Microsoft Office, Microsoft Word vulnerability, no big surprise. And we have the ability to go ahead and show you our expert rating, which again, if you're not familiar with experts, that's really CrowdStrike's kind of extension from the CVSS scores. Again, they do a fantastic job kind of showing you the attack path and the kill chain, but expert takes it to the next level to be able to exemplify and take exploit status and how easy or complex it is to use amongst a number of other characteristics to kind of further extend that kind of rating. Now, we also have network exploitability as well. This is where you can go ahead and be able to see expert criticality, internet exposed access, and CVSS attack vectors. And you can kind of see a culmination when all of these network exploitability items kind of meet those 3 criteria. Again, it's clickable. You can go ahead and be able to dive into these vulnerabilities. And now we're filtering by a couple more things. Again, the biggest thing here is CVS attack vector is really focused around networking rather than just kind of a very high level, generic view from criticality and actively used, like I was kind of playing around with earlier. The idea here is that we want to arm you with all this information so you can be able to kind of start from this high level dashboard and then be able to change it as you see fit. Again, in this view, I don't have the ability to change this exposure management dashboard from my permissions, but you can actually adjust these dashboards or clone them and add additional widgets and delete other ones that may not be applicable to you to make sure it kind of fits your business needs. Now, if we pivot off of here and we go ahead and take a look at attack path analysis, this is a pretty cool kind of dashboard or a user interface here. Excuse me, just taking a sip of water. Right here, this is where you can go ahead and actually see these different nodes. Again, nodes from like a system perspective, we're just kind of looking at these different machines, and we're looking at different path attributes. So basically, how many hops or how many things would an adversary have to do to actually break into this organization? And again, we can go ahead and, sort by length, longest to shortest. If we go shortest to longest, again, there's a good amount of data in here, but you can go in here and be able to see and look at these path risks. So again, for these particular machines, we can go ahead and click in here and see all the different vulnerabilities and misconfigurations that are going to, kind of outline that path. But not clicking into each of these machines because that's not really helpful from a enterprise view. You can go ahead and be able to look at this from an attack path vulnerability or attack path misconfiguration as well, to be able to kind of pivot off of that individualized data and bring it back to these CVEs. And then you can either export this data, create a schedule report to send it somewhere else to a ticketing system, or again, leveraging our Fusion SOAR allows you to be able to take this information and pipe it over to wherever you might need it. Maybe it's your patch management system. Maybe it's a ticketing system that your IT folks are just going through their kind of normal, IT cadence with. And you can even set the severities of those tickets, through all of that. SOAR, Fusion is very configurable to kind of meet your business needs, depending on, whether they're very general or, granular, or they kind of grow with you. Now, if we pivot back over here and take a look at external assets, there we go. This is where we're starting to bring in that EASM data. Now, one thing I want to outline, Falcon Surface has its own GUI where you can go in and be able to see all this information. It's one of the few items we're still working on, and we're giving you the ability to leverage kind of the standalone data. Again, as I mentioned earlier, you have the ability to look at this data from a standalone product perspective. But a lot of people to kind of dip their toes in, what they'll do is they will go ahead and leverage the data that we're getting from Falcon Surface in the context of the entire picture of exposure management. So the data that we're looking in here is coming from Falcon Surface, but the Falcon Surface UI looks like this. So if you only care about external data, maybe that's you're really quarter or annual kind of focus, because you're kind of ahead from your perspective of your security posture or hygiene. You can still achieve that. You can come in here, you can look at different trends, you can look at different inventories, alerts, be able to filter to your heart's content, and be able to have this data continuously update so you can reduce your overall external footprint. So one thing I always like to highlight, if that is what you're trying to achieve, you have the ability to do that with exposure management. And again, the way I got here, it's actually SSO'd right in here. If you just go exposure management, external attack surface, and then legacy UI, it'll actually pop you over there. I know we're still working on kind of joining all that data in here. That being said, all you have to do here is be able to add, that external asset tab. And by add, I mean just click it. And then you can come over here and be able to just look at high and medium confidence from asset confidence to be able to look at your most relevant data. So from here, if we care about asset criticality, I can go ahead and be able to assign that here. If I have other subsidiaries within my organization, because again, keep in mind with Falcon Surface, we have the ability to look at your ecosystem of an organization just by looking at the breakdown of your organizations by company name and just a main URL. So if you're a holding company or some type of multi-level organization where you have subsidiaries or different, kind of, wholly owned independent portions of the organization or company, kind of under the parent umbrella, if you will, we can break those out. So that's what you are getting when you actually see subsidiaries under here. So again, if I wanted to look at, I don't know, 4 or 3 manufacturing Japan, I can go ahead and click on that, hit apply, be able to filter this down, be able to then look at these externally data points and say, okay, let's click in here. Let's look at this information, be able to, kind of filter through it and be able to fully understand, kind of what this issue is, and then be able to pivot and take action off of it. I can assign asset criticality, or I can review and assign the asset status here as well. So that's kind of exposure management and a little bit of Falcon Surface in here, in a nutshell. Thank you for everyone that attended. More than happy to stick around and field some questions. As Blair said, if you have them, drop them in the chat, and we'll go ahead and be able to take care of y'all. So thank you.
All right. Thank you everyone for showing up. If you have any sales questions that are related, please feel free to reach out to CrowdStrike at DLT.com. Our next episode is going to be Wednesday, August 14th at 2 p.m. Uh, Keep healthcare protected with modern cyber attacks with CrowdStrike Identity. The presenter is going to be Mark Belcher. And for that, please go ahead and register at DLT.com/CrowdStrike. And just a quick reminder, take a moment after this webinar for a quick survey, and it will populate when it ends.
Thanks, Peter. It does look like we have a few questions that came up, so I'll go ahead and read through those. For the first one, how does exposure management help me get visibility that traditional Falcon doesn't provide?
Yeah, great question. So the idea with Falcon EDR or next gen antivirus, depending on what you're looking at, that's really focusing on attacks in real time. Where exposure management, as I mentioned before, is really focusing on proactive items. So if you're looking at vulnerabilities, if you're looking at asset, discovery, things that are external that shouldn't be external, those can lead to different attacks that Falcon, EDR ultimately will help you with. But being proactive in security is definitely kind of the best blended approach.
Great. For the next question, what's the best way to operationalize the data that exposure management gathers?
Yeah, great way to be able to operationalize the data, like I mentioned, is kind of going to those macro level dashboards, kind of picking a area of topic, and drilling further down into that information, being able to send it over via tickets, IPs, APIs, or using SOAR, whether it be Fusion or maybe you're already leveraging a third party SOAR. So I'd say that's at a high level the best way to operationalize this data.
Great. For the last question, can exposure management be used to replace any existing point products that I have in my security stack today?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have the ability to easily replace different like IT ops products, or I'd say the biggest one is like vulnerability assessment. So if someone's using like a Qualys or Rapid7 or something like that, and they want to kind of consolidate data into a single pane of glass and reduce agent bloat on their machines, those areas would be where I would start.
Perfect. Well, it looks like that's all the questions we have at the moment. So, if any questions come up after this webinar, please don't hesitate to reach out to someone on our team, and we'll follow up with you. And I would just like to take this time to thank everyone that joined us today. And we hope to see you at our next webinar on August 14th. Thanks so much for joining us. And thank you again to both of the Peters. Have a great rest of your day.
Have a great one. Thank you.